A lot of people tell me that they can't imagine writing a book. It's such a gargantuan task. I think it's an excuse. Well, in this video, let me show you 3 strategies that'll make sure that you can tackle such a gargantuan task. It's a lot easier than you think. But if you think writing a book is a gargantuan task, follow me. So how on earth do you go about creating a piece of art molded in bronze that stands 5 times higher than you, the artist? Because it doesn't come about by accident. And that's the point. It doesn't come about by accident. In the same way, your book will not come about by accident. It won't come about by your dreaming about it. You have to have a vision for what you want the book to achieve. You have to plan it. This is the mind-boggling fact about Henry Moore's immense sculptures. They were planned. There was a 3-step process of modelling, then assembling, and then final linking and smoothing. And here is the direct parallel with writing a book. These same 3 strategies of modelling, assembling, and linking can be used to write your book. Now, don't get me wrong, they won't make writing your book any easier. Writing a book is one of the hardest creative things you will ever undertake in your life. But these 3 strategies make writing a book possible for everyone. You don't have to give birth to your book fully formed in one almighty stream of consciousness brain dump. If you have a message to share and you want to write a book, then using these 3 strategies, like Henry Moore, will make writing your book possible. Let's take a look at the first strategy, modelling. Henry Moore mocked up his sculptures in miniature. He modelled them in clay. He built something that he could hold in his hands, something he could work in his hands, something small and malleable. For you, as an author, how you model or mock up your book is by writing the table of contents. This is the first strategy for making your book not quite so gargantuan. Now, the table of contents is not a trivial part of your book. It's not just one of the first pages that you see as you open the covers. The table of contents is your vision for how the book starts, how it evolves, and how it concludes. With the table of contents, you're planning a journey through time for your reader, and you build it a section at a time. I'll put a link here to a more detailed video on how to structure your book. But with the table of contents, you are modelling your book. So write numerous tables of contents until you're happy with the flow and the balance. Table of contents it's your book in miniature. So work with your miniature book, your table of contents, mold it until you're happy to start work on the book itself. What goes at the beginning, what goes in the middle, and what concludes the book. Practice writing your book. Rehearse your argument very broadly by writing out your table of contents until you're happy with the work as a whole, until you're happy with the book as a work in progress. Now, the table of contents can change as you actually start to write the book, but it gives you a framework, a solid framework to follow to break down the task into achievable stages and sections. The second strategy we can borrow from Henry Moore is to assemble your book. And you assemble your book in sections, exactly like Henry Moore designed his gigantic sculptures, in sections. His sections really were gigantic. When he wanted to display his work around the world, it involved cranes, trains, and ships to move them about. Now, your sections won't be that large, hopefully, but they may seem large to you. But be reassured, firstly, they will follow the design laid out in your table of contents. Secondly, if you take almost any non-fiction book off the shelf, you'll see it's divided into sections, usually 3, sometimes 4, but occasionally more. I'll put a link to a video at the end that includes a case study on how many sections you can have in a book. It's infinite, frankly. But for starters, when you're designing your book, you should perhaps think of 3 broad sections. The beginning or the context for the book, what Henry Moore might think of as the legs or the foundation of the work. Then in the midsection or the central part of the book, there are the options to explore, the so what of the book, what Henry Moore would think of and what you might think of as the body of the piece. And finally, there's the end of your book, the what now, the conclusion or capstone. You know, I've never really thought of it as a head or the brains of the book before, but it's often where you add your newest thinking, your big idea, to create your contribution to knowledge, if you like, your thought leadership, if you will. So let me share a little aside with you now about exactly how you craft these sections, because it has an impact on how fast you can write your book. Now, when it comes to how you construct these sections, well, it depends a little bit on how you like to work. Often people are freaked out by the idea of filling blank page after blank page, but there's no need to freak out. You just need to know how to fill the pages. You need to have a process that works to construct the sections. So again, let's learn from Henry Moore, because as a sculptor, he has 2 immediate strategies that we can use. First, there's what you might call the chipping away strategy. He has all the material in one block, whether that's wood or plaster or even stone, and he's chipping away the bits he doesn't need. So one way that you can work is literally to create a Word document with all the material that you want to include in a chapter or section. Your draft ideas for the introduction or conclusion, quotes that you've assembled from various sources, transcripts from interviews that you've done. Put them all in one word processing document, and then move around the different sections, move them to where they need to be, where they feel right for you, and then delete the parts that you don't need. Always follow your table of contents. Henry Moore would always model his large works against his smaller wooden carvings. You've got to make sure the opening links to the previous chapter and that the chapter ends up where you need it to end up. So that's the chipping away strategy. The second strategy is the building up strategy. From a wireframe, Moore would slowly build up layer after layer of plaster to create a much larger model that he could then cast his bronze sections from. So for you as a writer, and this is how I tend to work, I often create a skeleton or outline for a chapter that I want to write. And I imagine the process rather like placing a series of stepping stones across a river, one at a time. And then I work really hard to develop, well, what's the best introduction I can? What's the first stepping stone? From the riverbank, I place that first stone. I'm looking for a striking quotation, an astonishing fact. And then bearing in mind where I want to get to on the other side of the river, I can fairly easily identify what's the next stepping stone that I need to have here. How big should it be? How stable? Can I get to the next spot? When you have a process for how you'll construct your sections and your chapters, you can go amazingly fast. So the second strategy is assembling your vast amount of material into these different sections, chapters, and importantly, excluding anything, cutting away, chipping away anything that does not fit, anything that's not relevant. The final strategy is the actual assembly or smoothing or linking of the chapters and sentences together. You may know this, but it may surprise you to discover that Henry Moore's bronzes are all hollow, with an internal architecture, scaffolding that holds the pieces together, linking the pieces together. It's the same writing a book. Internally, you need links to hold the chapters and the paragraphs and the sentences together. This is down to your writing. Now, how to write could be a course in itself. In fact, Jacqueline and I used to teach journalism at the Journalism Training Centre, and it takes a good chunk of time to become a good writer, make no mistake. But you can pick up the tools very quickly, and you get better as you write. The more you write, the better you become. I'll link to a couple of books on writing in the description, and they'll help you. But let me give you a couple of linking examples very quickly here. One very simple link structure to connect two chapters or sections together is the cliffhanger. I mean, you don't just stop at the end of each chapter and start a completely new chapter on the next page. You give a foretaste of what's to come. You create a cliffhanger so that people are desperate to turn the page and read on. Let me give you an example here from The CEO's Journey. This is a biography about Rami Makhzoomi, the CEO and president of Future Pipe Industries, and in this chapter we're talking about their expansion into the United States. Everything seems on track for the site's planned opening in September, when Robert Ricks of the US National Weather Service issues the following bulletin. Urgent weather message. National Weather Service, New Orleans, devastating damage expected. Hurricane Katrina is coming. I mean, you can see how you would want to read on. You're suddenly introducing something that we hadn't been discussing in the chapter. You want to know what happens to the plans of opening the factory and so on. Another strategy is repetition of a key word or a theme, either to say more about something or to change direction. Let me give you a quick example from The New Rules of Living Longer by my sister-in-law Yvonne Sonsino, a global partner at Mercer's, the HR consultancy. The reason that you as an individual need to take more charge of your own career in later life is because only the most enlightened employers are yet seeing the need to encourage older workers. I was recently in a discussion group with about a dozen European companies who were enlightened. So the use of enlightened companies as a theme links these two paragraphs. And we were talking about the future of work. We talked about what some researchers seem to regard, so the idea of talking and then going on to explain what they were talking about. We talked about what some researchers seem to regard as the peak of your working life. So we debated how jobs will have to change. Back to this idea of talking, debating, using a different word this time. So your use of language can link the sentences together and smooth over any hurdles or bumps in the reading. So words are like staples or paper clips, linking and holding your ideas together. So that's two quick ideas there. Cliffhangers to link chapters and repetition to link sentences. So let's take stock. Yes, a book is a big undertaking, but if you understand the interlinked processes of design by crafting and polishing a strong table of contents, if you understand how to assemble sections by selecting relevant material for the different sections of your book, and finally, if you glue the whole book together, smooth out the joins with links and words, then you too can write a book. Someone who's never thought of writing a book, who thinks of a book as a gargantuan task, has no clue how to manage the process. But you now understand that there are processes behind the gargantuan task of writing a book. When I first saw the massive sculptures at Henry Moore's home, I was absolutely stunned. And there's a great story actually about the time Henry Moore discovered polystyrene. He'd been building a mound on the horizon at his farm because he wanted to put some large sculptures against the skyline. Now, normally, something of the scale he wanted to build would take 6 months, or maybe more, to construct in plaster before he could cast it in bronze. Well, he was able to trim the sections, cut them down, and carry them to the mound on his shoulders in just 3 days. It's astonishing to think that this whole sculpture was designed and created in just 3 days. Okay, then there was the casting in bronze, but the visualization, the image was made in just 3 days. That's stunning. When you know how to do something, you can work amazingly fast. So don't let me hear you say a book is a gargantuan task. Well, actually it is. There's no mistake about that. But don't let me hear you say that you can't do it, because you can learn.
People think that artists are people that work for pleasure, by instinct, and without ever using their minds. There's a big and intellectual effort in learning to draw properly, which Leonardo showed it and Michelangelo showed it. Those had great intellects. It isn't a God-given gift.
So if you want to write a book, step 1, craft your table of contents. What's the journey the reader takes through your book? Polish your table of contents until you're happy with it. Model your book. Step 2, break the creation of the book into 3 or 4 larger sections as shown in your model, your table of contents. Each section fulfills a part of the structure, the foundations or the legs, the body of the book or the intellectual head or the argument. Step 3, link the sections together, smooth out the joins, make them invisible for the reader. You can do this. If you have a message that's important enough to share, no excuses. Check out the video in the link. There's more detail on how to structure your book. Subscribe if you haven't already to get all our tutorials. Hit the bell and like this video if it was helpful. And I'll see you in the next video.